Welcome back to Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights.
Ah, yes.
Today we're tackling a topic that's probably on everyone's mind at some point.
Yeah.
Taxes in Vietnam. Don't worry.
It's a big one.
We're using a recent article straight from the Harley Miller website to break it all down,
Oh, okay.
especially for expats like you.
Yeah. And the first thing to really grasp is this idea of tax residency.
Okay.
It might sound basic, but it's the cornerstone of how Vietnam figures out your tax obligations.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
It's not just about how long I've been perfecting my Sin Chow. Crap.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
If you're in Vietnam for the long haul, specifically 183 days or more within a calendar year, you're considered part of the family tax-wise.
Oh, wow.
They'll be looking at your global income.
So if I'm just here for a shorter stint,
Yeah.
it's a different story.
Right. Then Vietnam only focuses on the income you earn while you're physically here.
Ah. Yeah.
But it's not just about how many days are on your visa.
No.
If you set up a permanent home or even have a long-term rental agreement,
Okay.
that can also tip the scales towards tax residency.
So it's about physical presence, but also the intention to stay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But how does all this actually affect the amount of tax I owe?
Well, Vietnam uses something called a progressive tax system for residents.
Okay.
Imagine a staircase where each step represents a different income level.
Okay.
The higher you climb, the higher the tax rate on that step,
Mm-hmm.
but only for the income that falls within that specific step.
I'm getting a visual here.
Right.
So it's not like suddenly my whole income is taxed at the highest rate just because I got a raise.
Exactly. It's gradual.
Okay.
Now, for non-residents, it's a bit simpler.
Yeah.
They have a flat tax rate applied to whatever they earn within Vietnam.
I see.
No climbing stairs there.
Wow. I hadn't realized there was such a significant difference between how residents and non-residents are taxed.
Yeah.
So knowing where you stand is super important.
Yeah.
And the Harley Miller article actually walks through the steps of how to file right.
It does.
All right.
First up is registration.
Okay.
Everyone working in Vietnam needs a tax code,
Yeah.
which is usually taken care of by your employer when you start.
Okay.
They'll help with submitting the necessary documents to the tax office.
It's good to know what happens after registration.
Next comes the monthly tax declarations.
Okay.
Again, your employer will likely handle this, calculating and paying your taxes based on your income and any deductions you're eligible for.
Right. But even if someone else is handling the paperwork, it's still important for me to understand the process right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to be aware of what's being submitted on your behalf and when the deadlines are.
Got it. So monthly declarations, check. What else?
Finally, there's an annual tax finalization.
Okay.
It's like balancing your checkbook at the end of the year, making sure everything adds up and you've paid what you owe.
Gotcha.
This is especially relevant for certain types of income or situations where taxes haven't been withheld throughout the year.
So a final check to ensure everything is squared away.
Yeah.
It sounds straightforward enough,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm guessing it's not always smooth sailing, especially for expats navigating a new system.
You're right.
Yeah.
The Harley Miller article actually points out some common challenges expats face, particularly with language barriers and documentation.
Language barriers make sense.
Right.
Not all of us are fluent in Vietnamese, so dealing with official documents can be tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But what about documentation?
Yeah.
What kind of issues do expats typically run into?
Well, think about it. You've got receipts, records, all sorts of forms. It's easy to lose track, especially if you're not used to the Vietnamese system.
Yeah.
And without the right paperwork, things can get delayed or you might even face penalties.
That sounds stressful.
Yeah.
So staying organized is key.
Absolutely. Keep a meticulous record of all your tax-related paperwork throughout the year.
Yep.
That means receipts, contracts, income statements, everything.
Okay. Noted. A well-organized system it is.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I'm unsure about a specific document or requirement?
Mm-hmm. Don't hesitate to reach out for help.
Yeah.
Vietnam has plenty of bilingual tax advisors and international accounting firms. They can make sure you're on the right track.
That's reassuring. Now, we talked about deductions earlier. Can you give us a bit more detail on those? What are some key deductions that expats should know about?
Of course. Everyone gets a personal allowance.
Yeah.
You can also claim deductions for dependents like children or elderly family members.
Right.
Contributions to social and health insurance are deductible too, as are donations to certain charities.
So there are ways to potentially lower my tax bill if I understand the system and keep good records.
Exactly. And this is another area where professional advice can be incredibly valuable.
Okay.
A tax consultant can help you identify all the deductions you're eligible for.
Speaking of professional advice, That sounds like a good investment, especially if you're new to Vietnam or just feeling overwhelmed.
It definitely is. And it's important to remember that Vietnam takes tax compliance seriously.
Okay, let's talk about that. What happens if I miss a deadline or make a mistake on my tax declaration? What are the consequences of non-compliance?
Well, there are penalties for late filing, and those penalties can increase the longer you wait.
So no procrastinating on those taxes.
Right. And even honest mistakes on your declarations can lead to penalties.
Oh,
And intentional tax evasion can have much more serious consequences.
that's a bit daunting.
It is. But it's really not worth the risk. It's always best to stay on the right side of the law and seek professional help if you're unsure about anything.
Great advice. Prevention is key. Now, this has been really helpful in understanding the basics of Vietnam's tax system. What would you say is the most important takeaway for expats like myself?
I think the biggest takeaway is that while the Vietnamese tax system may seem complicated at first, it's completely manageable with the right information and resources.
That's good to hear. It sounds like staying informed and organized are crucial.
Absolutely. And remember, tax laws can change, so it's essential to keep up to date.
Are there any resources you recommend for staying informed?
Of course, the Harley Miller Law Firm website is an excellent place to start.
Oh.
We have a wealth of information specifically tailored for expats, covering everything from taxes and visas to business setup.
That's a great tip. We'll be sure to include a link to the website in the show notes.
And if you have any complex questions or need personalized advice, don't hesitate to reach out to our team. We're here to help you navigate the legal landscape in Vietnam.
It sounds like Harley Miller Law Firm is truly a one-stop shop for expats.
We strive to be. Our goal is to make your transition to Vietnam as smooth as possible.
That's fantastic. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final words of wisdom for our expat listeners out there?
Just remember that you're not alone in navigating the Vietnamese tax system. There are resources and support available to help you every step of the way.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
To all our expat listeners, stay informed, stay organized, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Vietnamese taxes.
Until next time on Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights.